Hey everybody, welcome to The Real on Real Estate. I'm Taylor Johnson. I'm here with my dad, and one thing we have in common is we're both top producing realtors.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm Taylor's dad, and Taylor and I have a lot of things in common, but we also have some major differences. We live on opposite sides of the country. I'm one generation, she represents another. So if you're buying, you're selling, or just wondering, we're here to introduce you to a side of real estate that I'm certain you've never heard.
So thanks for following along, and let's get into it. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Real on Real Estate podcast. I'm in Florida this morning. My dad's in Minnesota. We've got Vaish back, who's our moderator, just to make this as accessible as possible to as many listeners. And she's in Delaware. So we're covering a lot of grounds in the USA.
Yeah, so today's topic, we were going to touch on wealth building in real estate. And one of the ways to do that is to, buy and resell houses. Many people refer to that as flipping houses. And some of the first feedback that we got of giving us advice on what our next episode should discuss, this one has come up multiple times. So we're going to take a couple of very specific examples. Taylor's just finished one of these up. And so we're just going to spend some time talking from start to finish about Taylor's experience, very successful. She identified a great property, she improved it and resold it all in a short amount of time. So we're going to talk about that and also get into managing and using contractors and selecting contractors, and also who is really capable of doing, quote unquote flipping.
Right. So like my dad said, I just did my first flip in 2024. It was one of my highlights of the year. I mean, I had an absolute blast doing it. It was very rewarding work and it was lucrative too. But one thing I should say is doing a flip is not for everybody. I mean, if you're like super type A and a big planner, this is going to drive you nuts because there's a lot of unexpected shit that comes up on the daily basis. It's a lot of long hours. There's a lot of moving pieces to manage it. And that's why a lot of people, when they do a lot of renovations, they hire a contractor, to do that part of the process for them. In my scenario, I didn't have a contractor. I subbed everything out myself, which is a big savings on money. But the flip side of that is the time that goes into it, and the decision making and managing the process.
Well, and I think Taylor, maybe just describing the different people that are involved in a flip. What you're talking about is you were the general contractor, the person over the top of the whole project. And then you hired other contractors to do the work and you managed, those workers. And so one of the ways, to do a construction project is also to hire a general contractor. And the general contractor charges a fee, typically a percentage of the overall project value. And what Taylor did is stepped in and took over that general contractor, which means besides needing to have the vision and direction and all that, it's supervision of all the different trades and contractors that come in.
Right. And when we say trades, for this specific property, it was located on Vilano Beach, which is where I live. It's an island in St. Augustine. We had plumbers, electricians, drywallers, handymen, the tile guys, the AC guys. We got some concrete work done to the driveway. So we're talking 6, 7, 8 different trades of subcontractors that were hired. And, the first step of flipping a house is finding the right property, right? There was this property on Vilano that I really had my eyes set on. I think it was listed at like $650 originally. Concrete block home, great location, had never flooded. It was on 2.5 lots. So I saw some value there, but it was from the 70s and everything inside this home was original. I had been watching this property for a while because it was listed. I knew for myself that I wouldn't be able to purchase the property and be able to afford the renovations needed because that's cash on hand. Maybe I had the down payment for a $650,000 house, but when you're doing a flip, not only do you have to purchase the house, you have to have the budget to be able to do the necessary repairs and renovations, which I didn't have. And I also thought 650 was a little high for the house, at least for a flip.
And that's a good point there too, Taylor. Yeah, number one is identifying the house. The other part of that is buying it at a price where you can make improvements and resell it, and there be some margin for you to make its profit. It's one step further than finding the right house. It's also buying it at a price where you can make money. And that's kind of what you were
Exactly.
just talking about, is you needed to buy it right for this whole thing to make sense. So it's not just, hey, oh, this is a great property, needs a lot of improvement. If you overpay for it, it doesn't matter how good a work you do. You could price yourself right out of making any money.
Exactly.
So who would you recommend do a flip? Can you still make money if you have a general contractor? Or where do you kind of need to be at mentally to make a decision like that?
Depending on the size of the renovation project is what percentage you can expect a general contractor to take. What was yours, Taylor? Around 100,000 in improvements? Is that what you ended up doing?
Yeah, 112 to be exact.
Yeah. And so I would expect in a case like that, a general contractor is going to want to make 20 to 30% of that project. So add that on. So that's $20,000 or $30,000 to manage it. Maybe that's more. As far as who can do it, you also, and can you do it while hiring a general contractor? If you don't provide some, sweat equity like Taylor did as the general, your margins are going to decrease by however the contractor charges, the general charges for that. That is part of the equation that you have to figure out up front.
Right. And so I saw this property, I saw the vision for it. The number felt a little high, but what I did is I reached out to the listing agent and I gathered as much intel as possible on the seller's situation to find out what number they really need to make a deal happen. Based on those conversations and the seller's situation, I felt like there was a lot of room there to get this property at a much lower price. So I'm watching this property. It was at 650, then it dropped to 600. And this is when I knew, there was an opportunity. And the very first person I called, because like I said, I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I needed an investor. The very first person I called was my dad. And I told him, I think I've got a smoking deal. I think there's some money to be made here in a short period of time. The bones are good. It's just cosmetics, big renovation. But my dad was doing a big project of his own at that time, and his cash was tied up. So it didn't work out to my dad. So I called one of my investors that I've done several deals with. I told him, I think we can get a smoking deal on this house, but it has to be cash. They're not going to take a loan on it. It's got to be a cash deal and a quick close. And by a quick close, I said 10 days. A cash deal with a 10-day closing, purchasing the property as is for a seller that really needs the money is, could be a workable deal. So that's what we did. We submitted an offer, I think in the high 400s originally, with a 10-day closing, cash deal as is, 3-day inspection period. And we ended up at 500 for the purchase price, got the inspections done, came back again, and the property was ultimately purchased for $500,000. It is one of, if not the best deal on Villano in 2024. We purchased the property for $500,000, and what I proposed to my investor before he purchased it was that if he brings the cash, purchases the property, I will do all the renovations and get this property to its full potential, and we'll flip it. We'll sell it in a couple of months. I set the expectation of 6 to 8 months for the work that was needed, and we'll flip it. The investor agrees. We get this deal done for $500,000, and then, all of a sudden this becomes really real for me. I've made a lot of promises. This is by far the biggest renovation I've ever done. And it actually feels like more pressure because someone else's money is on the line rather than just my own.
Well, I'm glad, first of all, Taylor, I'm glad you feel that way, right? I think that says something about your character, and a big piece of our conversations about real estate is probably about character. It's so comforting to hear you say that, because there's some people that would accept money, make big promises, be like, well, I hope this works. But what you're saying is, hey, I'm accountable, and accountability in this business is something that we can't talk enough about. That makes me proud, Taylor, that's how you feel when you make a commitment, that it's a big deal. So,
well, thanks, Dad. But yes, I felt that big time. At this point, I had bought my first place and I did a big kitchen renovation there. Then I bought a second place, which was a full renovation, new kitchen, bathrooms, floors, the whole shebang. But still, this property on Villano Beach with my investor was the biggest project I had taken on at this point. While we were structuring this deal, this 10-day close, I was in Barbados, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew right when I get back, the day I get back, it is go time. I actually got back on closing day. This house, like I said, it had really good bones. It had a great oversized lot. The roof was newer, but the layout was funky. So on the bottom floor, there was 2 bedrooms, a full bath. Upstairs was the kitchen, tiny kitchen, pink countertops. And then the living room conjoined with the dining room, and then a master and a full bath in the master. And one of the things I noticed right away was that the only bathroom upstairs with the kitchen and living space was the master bathroom. That is really dysfunctional for a floor plan to have your guests and other members of the household to be using the master as the guest bath as well. I knew that was something that needed to change, and I knew, this needed to be an $800,000 house for the numbers to work. So we bought it for $500,000. My goal was for this to be a $750,000 to $800,000 house.
And how do you make that up? Is it the quality of the build, or what factors did you think about in minimizing the cost of renovation but increasing the value of the house?
Well, Vice, that is the secret sauce, right? Understanding about what improvements need to be done and which ones will get you a return, meaning you put $20,000 into an improvement that you'll make your money back and your profit. And what things, if you did it, would the market not pay you any more money? You could go spend $10,000 on something and the new buyer comes in and it's not worth anything to them.
And have you seen that? Does that happen often with people?
Oh, fairly regularly. One of the things that I see is that in the upper bracket, you can take very simple things like the kitchen faucet. I've had, clients that have had $10,000 kitchen faucets, right?
What?
So, there was a the tile in this bathroom was $50,000 just for the tile. And so, yes, there are many times where people can make improvements to a property. Those are extreme examples. But one of the things that Taylor had to navigate was exactly that. It's like, okay, I have a specific budget. I want to retain the quality. Taylor lives there. She's talking about doing a house flip in her neighborhood. So there's automatically some accountability. So quality was a concern of Taylor's. So that is really good for a buyer. It's a good question to ask. Where does
Well,
the man, where do the people that own this live?
And then, not to mention, it's this funny balance because people don't like buying flips.
Right.
People don't like to buy a house that they can look at the history and see it was sold 6 months ago for $300,000 less than what they're paying
Mhm.
for. So I knew, even though our goal was to spend around 100,000 plus or minus in renovations, I knew I needed that to look like 200,000 to make a buyer feel good about buying this property 6 months down the road. So, there was things on this property that I did for that reason that I might not have even done on my own property. One of those things was we did a full repipe. So it was all copper plumbing in the house that was original. That's really common, especially in Minnesota. It's actually preferred. Down here in Florida, there's a negative connotation about it and it feels riskier to consumers. So now the updated plumbing is PCVP. I was contemplating this because it was an extra 12 grand to get this full repipe done, but we were adding a half bathroom upstairs. We were relocating the kitchen completely. So we were already going to have, a lot of the walls open, changing the plumbing around anyways. And I knew with this full repipe, it would be, one hell of a marketing chip to have. And that makes consumers feel like, oh, they didn't just put lipstick on a pig here. They really got into the bones of this home and its quality, like my dad is saying.
Well, and I think that is, flipping houses, there are a lot that, I call frosting, where everything you can see looks good and new. But if you started peeling back the layers, you'd realize that this flipper covered up a lot of sins instead of dealing with them. And so that becomes a really big piece of reputation and all the things that go with flipping is that I see all too many. Somebody comes in, just absolutely sticks lipstick on it. I've general contracted my own houses. I have more experience than most realtors as it relates to new construction and renovation. And so I can spot out a lot of these sins that have been covered up. And so we can move on from it. If there's one area that you see that's a problem that's been covered up, how many more are there? So
What other shortcuts were taken?
As a buyer, if you, like you said, most people don't like to buy flips, but if you are looking at something that's been flipped, how is it just like as soon as you see one thing that's off, or do you need to depend on your realtor to tell you, or how can you know if the flip was really a good renovation?
I think another way of saying that people don't like to buy flips, I think people do. I think people get tricked by a lot of these flips. And I think if you're looking at a property or you're open to the idea of having something renovated that's, been flipped, and flip being, they've only owned it for months and it was terrible shape and they whipped it into shape. I think it's a great conversation for consumers to have with their agents about their capabilities and what role are they going to play if they buy a house like that. One of our other episodes is going to be home inspections. And so we won't go too deep on this, but a little bit of a pun there, because when we do home inspection, they're very surface level. No one's peeling back drywall and making sure moisture problems are mitigated or anything. It's a very surface level, jack of all trades, quick look, try to find anything obvious, and then bring in experts if we find any telltale signs.
Another way we wanted to make, a new consumer coming in feel good about this property was we did everything above board, with licensed contractors, and we also pulled permits. A lot of people, when they do flips, they don't pull permits.
Or not all of them.
Yeah, or not all of them. I felt like by taking that extra step and the time and the fees that go along with that adds a lot of credibility to the work that we've done.
Yeah, I mean, that was really important. I mean, that what you just said was really great point.
And I think just to put in perspective of, what goes into a flip. I mean, I was at this property a minimum of twice a day. I was the one picking out all the materials for the property, from all the appliances, light fixtures, floors, tiles, everything. And then, managing the subcontractors was a huge part of this process. And that was a learning curve for me as well. I was 25 years old at the time, and I'm a single female, and I might look a little unassuming, and I was responsible for managing 7, 8, 9 men, subcontractors. That process was really involved because you've got a lot of different personality types in these trades. I had to use a lot of different strategies to manage the different personality types that were involved in this project. And, there was some really great subcontractors that I'll probably use for the rest of my time in this industry. And there was other ones that I fired and had really hard conversations with. That was really stressful at times. I'm really grateful for the experience because I learned so much. Never pay somebody before the county inspection is done. That's a little tidbit I'll give you. Learned that one the hard way, tracking somebody down to get the final steps finished.
Taylor, would you actually talk about that for a second? Like how, I don't know if you and I ever got into this, but how and when did you pay your subs? Did some want money down? Did some want it just when they were done? Did they want progress payments?
All of the above. I had one handyman that was really involved with a lot of different parts of the project, and we gave him 50% down in the beginning and the other 50% when the project was completed. But that's because it was enough money that he's not going anywhere to get that final 50% of the project. We had others that wanted to be paid just at the end of the project, and some that were on quarter payments as the process progressed.
Maybe we're spending a lot of time on this portion of it because, if we just kind of reflect on this process, the first thing is you have to find a house. You have to identify a house. Then you have to figure out how much you can pay for it. And then assuming that you can put that deal together, you also had to figure out how to finance it. Whether that's an investor, your own, or however. And then the next step is you have to create a plan about the improvement plan. And then you have to hire your contractors and manage them. That becomes really involved and very stressful. Managing the subs because one can't start until another one's done. And then the guy promises you he'll be there on Thursday and you have to fire him the next week because he never showed. And then that holds back the next guy. And when Taylor is saying she's there a couple days every day, twice a day, it's that's how it goes. That's how you have to be prepared if you're going to play the role of the general contractor, because it's very hands on. And that in itself is enough to make it not reasonable for most people to do.
I was just gonna say, this sounds like a nightmare
Well, it
for me
it
personally.
looks, like real profitable and anyone can do it. And mind you, in the summary that I'm giving, I'm only into hiring and managing the contractors. And then she got those things done and then got the house, then she had it staged, and then her realtor side of her kicked in, where she staged it and prepared it and landscaping and all those pieces to get good pictures and do that and then put it all on the market. She did that piece of the pie too. I think the takeaways are, I think a lot of people fantasize about buying a house, renovating it, and reselling it for profit. For those of us that are realtors and doing this, we have a really significant advantage. For Taylor to do this is a huge advantage because she's her own realtor. So, you save your realtor fees, but more importantly, the market and what the market is going to pay in the end. And so, if this is something that you really want to pursue, you think that you have a passion of flipping houses and doing that, your first step, I think, is to get your real estate license and learn the real estate side, so at least you can handle that on your own. It's a huge advantage of our license, right? Is being able to do this full time, know our market, be able to identify opportunities. And minus that, Taylor, I mean, could you imagine?
There'd be no deal in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if you were in corporate America, maybe traveling for work, or at least having an immense amount of pressure and then trying to manage the flip that you did?
No, no. It pushed me to my absolute maximum limit, managing the flip and doing real estate. And those fields are very intertwined.
Right.
So if I was in a profession unrelated to real estate, I think it would be damn near impossible because it was a full-time job. And, you mentioned almost all parts of the process, but another thing was the materials. And that was incredibly time consuming. I mean, I stayed up till midnight, 1 a.m., after my work day, after managing the flip, to get the materials picked out, ordered, the measurements to make sure it was enough, so that they could get here in time for the subcontractors to be able to do their job. Because it was a flip, I was trying to save money every which way I could. And that also meant I was the one picking up the materials. I was the one going to Home Depot and Floor and Decor and loading up my car and, toilets, tiles, backsplash, and everything in between, So that was incredibly time consuming as well. There was not a single week during the flip, that between the flip and doing real estate, that I was working less than probably 70 hours. It's a big time commitment, at least if you have a tight timeline, which we did. I mean, we got all the renovations done in 14 weeks from closing date to finish in 14 weeks time. There was no room for any sort of delay with a timeline like that.
Oftentimes when our clients move, they say they're never moving again because the process was so stressful of literally just moving your family, right? People are busy. And even if the real estate side goes super smooth, it's a stressful process, right? They got to pack up, plan, move, do all those things. And they say, oh, we're never doing this again. And then, of course, a couple years later, we're selling them a new house, because you have that time in between when it ended and later. And Taylor's in that period right now. When she was in it, it was stressful. It was extra stress on top of stress, but it was successful. She's past it and she's ready to do another one because she's had a little time in between. She's learned something. Where I thought would be a good way to end this segment, Taylor, is just to talk for a second about the benefits there is to consumers to have a realtor like Taylor that has done flips for herself. And the reason why there's value there is a couple reasons. One, when you go through the process like Taylor did, you get to see a house in a whole new way, without its skin. You get to see houses. How old was that house, Taylor? What year was that house built? Do you remember?
I think it was 89, 86.
So you have an 80s house, 80s, 90s house, right? And when you go into an older house like that and pull it apart, you get to see how it functions, what failed, and we get to use that in our toolbox as we're going to look at houses because it teaches us how things should look, what things to look for, and it makes us a really good guide for people as they're looking at older houses and things to look for. We can bring an extra set of experience to them. But the other thing it does is we create relationships with all these subs. They are invaluable to our clients for their own improvements or as they get ready, put the house on the market and they want to do some improvements to enhance it, or they bought a house that needs work. When you have a realtor like Taylor that's doing these large scale projects, there becomes a really significant value on the consumer side to pull into her relationships, her knowledge, and her experience. And I think that's another benefit of realtors that are doing, this, quote unquote flipping work, because it pays off for our clients.
Yeah, and I think, we both agree if there's a good enough deal, we'll probably take that one for ourselves. But then there's situations like exactly like I was in. I couldn't do this alone and I needed an investor. And that's where the opportunity comes in for our clients. I mean, it was really a property that I would have done myself. I wanted to do it on my own. That's how it's probably a really good deal.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what Taylor's just talking about there is I had this guy that I met several years ago. He had heard of me in the area and he called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm looking for a house. And if you find, a really good deal, would you let me know?" And he goes, "But I just want you to know I won't sign a representation agreement with any realtor. Whoever brings me the deal is who I buy it for or buy it from." And I told him, I said, "Well, I mean, quite honestly, you wouldn't ever hear about a good deal from me if we weren't in a representation agreement. Because either there's going to be an opportunity that comes up and I buy it myself. If I don't buy it myself, I go to my loyal clients that are looking, and so I can give them an opportunity. And then if none of them want it, then you start farming out beyond that." And so that's just the truth about how this works, is that, realtors that are doing this day in and day out, when they find a great deal, they buy it themselves. If they can't, because, like Taylor's example, I was into a very expensive investment. I just didn't have the money to do it. That happens. And I'll come across a deal. I'm closing one next week where a great deal came up. I called up one of my clients. He bought it. He's flipping it. We sold it. He's closing on it next week because I was extended on my investment side. So that is another reason to have a good relationship with a realtor, is because you want to know the good deals when they come up. And if you think that you can just call every realtor in a market and tell them if they come across a great deal, you call them, their phone's not going to ring, because they're going to let their loyal clients know first. And if his phone does ring, it's probably not that good a deal. And that's the reality of how things work.
And, not that the point of this episode is successful flips. It's really just to provide some insight on what this process looks like and who might be a good fit for doing one. I'm really proud of this flip that I did this year. All in all, it was purchased for $500,000, about $112,000 went into the renovations. We priced it at $799,000 and we had multiple offers at $799,000, and it ultimately closed for for full price at $799. And after all of the title fees, real estate fees, everything in between, it was about an 18% return in 7 months. And that was a good one.
Yeah.
I'm on the hunt.
Yeah.
I'm on the hunt for the next one.
Well, we'll be looking for the next one. And, that's what we do. But I think it's a great story, Taylor. I think it was a really great experience for you personally. Building your own, net worth through real estate. But also, I know that it's helping your clients because you had that experience too.
Well, I learned a lot from you.
There,
So that helps too.
And I only can take you so far, Taylor, right? I mean, I can provide you some guidance, but you're the one that does it. And, that is a big separator in life. The people that talk about doing things and those people that do them. And, you're a doer. And this was an example of doing it, not just saying or thinking or listening to a podcast about it. It's about going and doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when I reflect back on it because the whole proposition to my investor was pretty ballsy given the experience that I had at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
But I just knew because I knew the market, because I knew this neighborhood, because I live here, I knew the numbers would work.
Well, that investor knew you and you had already done multiple transactions with them. So you weren't selling them on what you were capable of anymore. I mean, you've had to do that over the other transactions. And so, that's the benefit of doing right by people. He really enjoyed being part of that process and his family was involved with it too. And so, it was something that worked out really well for everybody. That's how, you want them to. And it's a great success story about how to do it the right way.
Absolutely. So hopefully more on the horizon soon with upcoming flips.
You don't get to decide when the next flip is going to come. The next flip presents itself to you. It's inevitable. Another opportunity is going to come and you're going to have more experience to know if it's the right one for you.
Or for you as the listener. Well, I think that's a pretty good gist on flipping houses. I'm sure some listeners are going to have some questions. So please, guys, message us on Instagram, text me directly, any questions that come up from this. Flips are not for everybody, but they certainly can be an incredible opportunity to help build your net worth through real estate. Again, just aligning with a realtor that can help you get there and help you identify what a good opportunity really is going to be the key to all of this. So as always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.
All right. See ya.